For the last few years, Ali Imsirovic has been known as one of the best MTT players in the world, but a recent tweet made by Alex "Don't Tread on Me Foxen" has now abruptly put many of Ali's achievements and reputation into question. In this tweet, Alex leveled two significant accusations against Ali. The first is that among the high-stakes community, Ali has been known for some time as being a chronic cheater, particularly online, and this allegation was quickly backed up by a number of professional poker players with receipts. Back on November 30th, 2020, GG issued a press release announcing that it had banned 40 accounts for using real-time assistance, which is essentially where in-game a player references a library of pre-solved unexploitable solutions to guide his decision. Coincidentally, or perhaps not so coincidentally, Ali's last result on GG was just one day before this announcement on November 29th, 2020. Given that Ali was very active on GG prior to that date, it seems odd that Ali would abruptly stop playing there of his own volition. But while this evidence is rather compelling, the timing is a bit curious. If this all happened over a year ago, and it was well known in the high-stakes community that Ali was cheating, why hadn't anyone prominent publicly come forward until now? The use of RTA is essentially theft, and since that time, Ali has continued to play using other avenues, racking up millions of dollars in the process. Well, one of the biggest problems with online poker is that in its current state, catching cheaters red-handed is virtually impossible. There are certain methods that can be used to identify potential wrongdoers. For example, GG uses proprietary algorithms to compare a player's strategies to GTO, with the idea that it's not humanly possible to very closely follow a solver's strategy over a large sample size. However, this type of evidence is in many ways very speculative. Top pros spend thousands of hours studying solver solutions, and many are able to follow solver-approved lines quite consistently, and they're getting better every day. Also, since it's not possible with current technology to solve the entire game of poker, there are legitimate questions regarding how accurate any proprietary algorithm can be to identify RTA usage when each player employs different assumptions when running their own sims. What this means is that even if there are rumblings and some relatively significant evidence of wrongdoing, to publicly accuse someone of cheating when there is no definitive way to prove it puts the accuser himself at risk. No one wants to be the guy that falsely accuses a player of cheating, which definitely could ruin the suspect's life. And this brings us to Alex's second accusation. In this one, Alex claims that in a 250k high roller, Ali deliberately observed the hole cards of Paul Fua, who was not doing a great job of protecting them. From the video evidence, it appears that Ali glances in that direction, though the footage cuts so quickly, it's hard to tell with certainty whether Ali actually saw the cards. But Alex further backed up his claim by pointing to Ali's actions in the hand, which, in his mind, would not have been taken had Ali not seen Paul's cards. So how credible is this accusation? Well, in this video, we'll be doing our own investigation to try to assess its veracity. So Ali opens the button with ace of hearts, 9 of clubs to a bit over a min bet, and Adamo defends the big blind with 7-5 off. To start off, we've run our own custom sim with the exact stack sizes and bets used from this hand. But before we get into the analysis, we should note some important caveats. This is an extremely complex spot with vastly varying stack sizes and ICM implications to boot. There's no way that Ali, or anyone else for that matter, had previously run or studied a sim that matches the exact parameters of this hand. Additionally, we've run the sim without limps, which could impact the ranges as well. So hopefully these ranges are close enough to these players' actual ranges to produce reliable results, but ultimately we need to take this analysis with a grain of salt. The flop is 6-4 deuce, all diamonds. Ali c-bets around 20%, Adamo raises small, Ali then 3-bets small, and Adamo folds. So up to the point of Ali's 3-bet, the action appeared to all have been relatively standard. Ali has a significant advantage on the flop, given how wide the big blind's calling range should be. And even though Adamo likely has more flushes, as he should be defending most suited combos, that advantage is somewhat mitigated by the fact that the flop cards are all low, which means the flop is blocking more of the big blind's flushes than the button's flushes. Also, the SPR is very low, which means despite the scary board, many of Ali's strong non-flush hands can stack off. And finally, when we add in the fact that Ali covers Adamo, who is the shortest stack, and only 5 places are being paid, it's likely the case that Ali is playing very aggressively here, perhaps c-betting his entire range. Given all these factors, Adamo likely recognizes here that Ali's range is wide with a lot of air, and so he does his thing by check raising with his straight draw. And although we did not add 7-5 off to Adamo's range in an attempt to keep the outputs as close to GTO as possible, raising with 7-5 suited seems to be perfectly fine. Further, to balance his play, Adamo would likely also raise with many of his strong hands as well, such as flushes, straights, and sets. With all of this setup in mind, Ali's 3-bet, in Foxen's view, is completely out of line. According to the sim Foxen ran, ace-9 off without a diamond is either a call or a fold, and when Ali does raise with his range, it should be a shove. Now there are a couple of caveats we should also note here. First, Alex indicates that Ali is in the cutoff, but he's actually on the button, so his starting range may not be totally accurate. Also, it appears that the starting stack size Alex used was 280 chips instead of 380, which may be why his sim was only 3-bet shoving in Ali's shoes. Finally, it's not totally clear whether Alex ran his sim using ICM. That all being said, according to the sims that we ran, both with and without ICM, the results for Ali's specific hand are the same. Ace-9 is a call or fold, and no offsuit aces raise without a diamond. And intuitively, it seems quite obvious that this hand is just not the best candidate to bluff with. As mentioned, Adamo has plenty of flushes and other strong hands on this board, so it would seem that Ali needs to be judicious with his aggression, and he should have a number of better bluffing candidates such as flush and straight draws that can pull ahead if Adamo calls. Further, the ace and the 9 without the diamond block a significant portion of Adamo's folding range, including some weaker straight draws. Now, of course, there's no rule that requires Ali to play in accordance with the solver. One could argue that this was a purely exploitative move that took into account both the ICM pressure of the situation and Adamo's tendency to play very aggressively. But on the other hand, if Ali is 3-betting with this specific combo, it raises the question of whether there are any combos in his range that he's not 3-betting with. Although the overall EV loss for 3-betting with this hand is relatively low, the maximum EV loss for 3-betting with respect to all combos in Ali's range is not much greater, which means ace-9 off with no diamond is near the bottom of the list of raising candidates. Also, we need to keep in mind that Adamo isn't the only one facing ICM pressure as the short stack. Ali is facing ICM pressure as well, since only 5 places pay, and he's currently in 4th place. In other words, Ali needs to consider the very real possibility that Adamo is holding a strong hand, and therefore when he 3-bets, he runs the risk of growing the pot with a bad bluff, thereby increasing his risk of bubbling in the future game. That all being said, if Ali had a different hand, perhaps for example Paul's hand, ace of diamonds 5 of clubs, raising would likely be a much stronger proposition. Not just because that hand has a lot more equity, but because of its card removal properties as well. And that card removal effect is relevant regardless of who is actually holding those cards. In other words, if Foxen is right and Ali did see Paul's cards, he would know with 100% certainty that Adamo himself doesn't have the 5 of clubs, and more importantly, the ace of diamonds. And this knowledge would give Ali an advantage because it provides him with unique information about the game state that Adamo does not possess. With the ace of diamonds out of play, Ali would know that the chances of Adamo calling a 3-bet are lower and the chances of Adamo folding are higher. Now, some may argue that even if we concede that this is all true, looking at your opponent's cards is not against the rules, and that may very well be the case, but at a minimum, it is unethical. Poker, just like any other competitive activity, is predicated on the notion that to the maximum extent possible, all players are battling on an even playing field. So for one player to have a significant advantage simply because he's sitting next to a guy that does not adequately protect his hole cards seems to be patently unfair. To condone this type of behavior would encourage others to actively try to look at their neighbor's cards, which is simply not a good look for the game. Additionally, this was not Ali's first rodeo. He knew Paul would be peeling his cards at that exact moment, and he moved his eyes in that direction anyways. And even if we were to give Ali the benefit of the doubt and assume that he only inadvertently saw Paul's cards, the ethical thing to do, rules aside, would be to alert the dealer that Paul's cards have been exposed so that everyone at the table would have equal access to that information. So from that standpoint, at a minimum, this second accusation lends more credibility to the notion that Ali is the type of player that may take inappropriate edges in other environments as well. And when we add together the totality of the circumstances, Ali's reputation in the community, the timing of GG's press release coinciding with Ali discontinuing to play on GG, Ali's apparent glance over to Paul's cards right when he was peeling them, and his very non-standard play in this hand, it would seem that at the very least, further investigation is warranted. So where do we go from here? Well, first, I think Alex should be commended for speaking up. It seems that recently some have been off-put by Alex's zealous and very vocal devotion to his personal beliefs, but I think at the same time it requires a person with that type of unwavering conviction to stand up in a situation like this where many others have remained silent. If we want to encourage others to speak out in a similar way in the future, we cannot shoot the messenger. And as for Ali, given the plethora of credible allegations against him, I think anyone that has been doing business with him needs to carefully reconsider their relationship and conduct further vetting if they intend for that relationship to continue. For example, presumably PokerGo has better footage which can more clearly show whether Ali's eyes only momentarily glanced in Paul's direction or whether his gaze was fixed on his hole cards, and this information should be made public. And finally, there are many different ways that online operators can tighten up their security, whether globally or specifically as it relates to Ali, which I've discussed extensively in another video. The tools and technologies needed to eradicate online cheating exist. The only question is whether the poker community possesses the resolve needed to protect the integrity of play, not just in this instance, but for the future of the game as well.